Johnny Carson reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a yellowed letter, and began to read. By the third paragraph, his voice broke. The Tonight Show. NBC Studios, Burbank, California. March 1985. Another Monday night. Another monologue. Another audience ready to laugh at Johnny's jokes about politics, Hollywood, everyday absurdities. The familiar rhythm of late-night television, the jokes, the banter with Ed, Doc's orchestra punctuating every punchline. Johnny was in the middle of a bit about the IRS. The audience was laughing. Ed was chuckling in his seat. The cameras were rolling smoothly through the practiced choreography of America's favorite late-night show. And then Johnny stopped. Mid-joke. Mid-gesture. His hand went to his jacket pocket. He pulled out an envelope, old, yellowed, the edges worn from being carried. He looked at it for a long moment, then at the audience. "Folks," he said, his voice different now, the performance gone. "I'm going to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to share something with you that I've been carrying for 14 years. The studio went quiet. Ed leaned forward in his chair, confused but attentive. Doc Severinsen lowered his trumpet. 300 audience members stopped laughing and started listening. Johnny Carson had hosted The Tonight Show for 30 years and interviewed thousands of guests, but none of them had been as powerful as this letter, written by a Vietnam nurse in 1971, now trembling in Carson's hands in 1985. Johnny carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting neat but hurried, the ink slightly faded. He unfolded it slowly, treating it like something sacred. "This letter," Johnny said, his voice steady but quiet, "was written by a woman named Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. She was an Army nurse in Vietnam. She wrote it in November 1971, 3 weeks before she was killed when her hospital unit was hit by mortar fire. She was 26 years old." The audience made a sound, not quite a gasp, more like a collective intake of breath. Ed's jovial expression vanished completely, replaced by something solemn. Johnny looked down at the letter, then back at the camera. "I received this letter in 1985, 2 weeks ago, from Sarah's younger brother David. He found it among her belongings that their mother had kept all these years. Sarah had written it but never sent it. David thought—" Johnny paused, composing himself. "David thought I should read it. He thought America should hear what his sister wanted to say." He cleared his throat and began to read. "Dear Mr. Carson, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, or if you'll ever read it if it does. But I'm writing it anyway because I need to say these things to someone, and for some reason, you're the person I keep thinking about. Every night in the OR, that's the operating room, when things get really bad, when we're working on boys who are 18 and 19 years old and shouldn't be here, when we're trying to save lives while rockets are landing outside, I think about your show. I think about you making jokes. About Ed laughing. About Doc and the orchestra playing. About all those people in your studio audience in their nice clothes, sitting comfortably, enjoying their Monday night. And I don't think about it with anger or resentment. I think about it with hope. Because that's what we're fighting for, isn't it? The right for people to sit in a studio and laugh. The right for America to be safe enough, comfortable enough, free enough that the biggest worry on a Monday night is whether you're going to make a joke about the president." Carson stopped mid-sentence reading the letter. The entire studio froze. Johnny's voice had cracked on the last sentence. He stopped, looking down at the paper, his jaw working as he fought for control. The studio was completely silent. Not the polite quiet of an audience waiting for the next joke. The profound silence of 300 people suddenly aware they were witnessing something real. Ed McMahon, Johnny's friend and sidekick for over 20 years, had tears running down his face. He wasn't trying to hide them. Johnny took a breath and continued reading, his voice rougher now. "I've been here for 11 months. I've held the hands of boys while they died. I've written letters to mothers telling them their sons were brave, even when the truth was they were terrified. I've learned to sleep through artillery fire and wake up instantly when a chopper brings in casualties. I don't tell you this to make you sad or to criticize you for making people laugh. I tell you this because I want you to know something. What you do matters. Making people laugh matters. Giving them 1 hour at the end of a hard day where they can forget their problems and just smile, that matters more than you might know. We have a small TV in the nurses' quarters. When the satellite works, we can sometimes pick up Armed Forces television. Last week, they aired an episode of The Tonight Show from 2 months ago. 12 nurses and 3 doctors crowded into a room meant for 4 people, and we watched you make jokes about your golf game. And for 20 minutes, we forgot we were in a war zone. For 20 minutes we laughed. One of the doctors, Captain Reynolds, who just finished a 14-hour surgery, laughed so hard he cried. He said it was the first time he'd laughed in 2 months. So this is what I want you to know, Mr. Carson, you're doing something important. Every night, you're reminding America that life can be light and funny and joyful. That we don't have to be serious and sad all the time. That laughter is a kind of medicine too. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Johnny paused again, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. The audience sat in reverent silence, many crying openly now. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was something else entirely. He looked at the camera, speaking directly to the millions watching at home. Sarah Mitchell wrote this letter on November 15, 1971. On December 4, 1971, her hospital was hit by enemy fire. She was killed while trying to evacuate patients. She was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star for her bravery. Johnny's voice was barely steady. Her brother David sent me this letter with a note. He said that their mother kept all of Sarah's belongings in a box for 14 years, unable to look through them. When she finally did 2 months ago, she found this letter Sarah had written but never sent. And David's mother, Sarah's mother, asked him to send it to me. She wanted me to know that her daughter believed what I did mattered. He folded the letter carefully, holding it against his chest. I've spent 30 years trying to make people laugh, Johnny said, his composure cracking completely now. And I've always wondered if it really mattered. If telling jokes while there's suffering in the world if it was enough. If it was worthwhile. He looked down at the letter in his hands. Sarah Mitchell thought it was. And I'm going to believe her. The studio erupted, not in applause, not yet. First came the sound of 300 people crying. Then, slowly, someone in the back row stood up. Then another. Then the entire audience was on their feet, not clapping, just standing in honor of a nurse who had died 14 years ago, believing that laughter mattered. Backstage, Johnny made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. Johnny walked off the stage. Just walked off, still holding the letter, while Ed stayed at the desk and the audience remained standing. He went backstage where David Mitchell was waiting in the green room. A man in his 40s, wearing his army dress uniform, his sister's Bronze Star pinned to his chest. The cameras followed Johnny backstage. No one had told them to stop rolling. The director, sensing something historic, kept every camera running. Johnny found David and embraced him without saying a word. The 2 men stood there, holding each other, while the audience watched on monitors and America watched at home. Finally, Johnny pulled back, still holding the letter. Your sister, he said, his voice hoarse. Your sister gave me something tonight. She gave me permission to believe that what I do matters. I don't know how to thank her for that. You just did, David said quietly. You read her words. You let America hear her. That's all she wanted, to be heard. To matter. Johnny led David back onto the stage. The audience, still standing, saw the man in uniform and understood immediately who he was. The applause that erupted was different from any applause The Tonight Show had ever heard, not the excited applause of entertainment, but the solemn, thunderous applause of honor and grief and gratitude. David stood beside Johnny's desk. Johnny held up the letter one more time. This letter, Johnny said to the audience and to the cameras, stays with me. I'm going to keep it in my desk drawer. And on nights when I'm tired or wondering if any of this matters, I'm going to take it out and remember Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell. I'm going to remember that somewhere, somehow, laughter is medicine. Joy is resistance. And making people smile is not a small thing. He looked at David. Your sister was a hero. Not just because of how she died, but because of how she lived. Because she chose to find hope in dark places. Because she believed in joy even in a war zone. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Johnny reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a card, one of his famous cue cards that he used for jokes during his monologue. He handed it to David. I want you to have this, Johnny said. It's from tonight's monologue. The joke I was telling when I stopped to read Sarah's letter. I was going to make people laugh with this joke. But your sister taught me something more important tonight. David took the card, confused. Laughter is important, Johnny continued. But remembering is important too. Honoring is important. Making sure that people like your sister aren't forgotten, that's important. So I'm giving up this joke, this moment of laughter, to make sure America remembers Sarah Mitchell. He turned to face the camera directly, speaking with quiet intensity. If you're watching tonight, I want you to do something for me. I want you to remember Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, Army nurse, who died in Vietnam in 1971 believing that joy and laughter and hope mattered even in the darkest times. And I want you to remember all the others like her, all the people who fought and served and died so that the rest of us could sit safely in our homes and watch television and laugh at dumb jokes about the IRS. The audience was silent. The orchestra was silent. Even Ed, sitting at his desk, couldn't speak. Johnny picked up Sarah's letter one final time. He held it up to the camera so that viewers at home could see the aged, yellowed paper covered in her neat handwriting. This letter saved me tonight, Johnny said softly. It reminded me why I do this. Why I've spent 30 years trying to make people smile. Because somewhere out there, someone needs that smile. Someone needs that moment of lightness. Someone in a dark place needs to remember that joy exists. He carefully placed the letter back in his jacket pocket, over his heart. Thank you, Lieutenant Mitchell. For your service. For your sacrifice. And for your letter. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. The show didn't continue with its regular format that night. There were no comedy sketches. No celebrity interviews. Johnny just sat at his desk and talked with David Mitchell about his sister. About her childhood, about her decision to become a nurse, about her letters home from Vietnam. America watched and listened and cried. After the show ended, Johnny had Sarah's letter professionally preserved and framed. He kept it in his office at NBC. Above it, he placed the cue card he'd given to David, the joke he never told, the laughter he'd sacrificed to honor a fallen nurse. When Johnny retired from The Tonight Show in 1992, that framed letter was one of the few things he took with him. It hung in his home office until the day he died. Every host who came after him, every person who sat behind a late-night desk and tried to make America laugh, knew the story of Sarah Mitchell's letter. They knew about the night Johnny Carson stopped telling jokes and started telling the truth about why laughter matters. David Mitchell kept the cue card Johnny gave him that night. He carried it with him for the rest of his life, just as Johnny carried Sarah's letter. The Tonight Show audience never forgot that episode. Neither did America. Letters poured into NBC for months, thousands of them, from veterans, from nurses, from families who had lost someone in Vietnam. All of them thanking Johnny for remembering, for honoring, for proving that laughter and reverence could exist in the same space. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Johnny never spoke publicly about that night again. He didn't need to. Sarah's letter had said everything that needed saying. When Johnny Carson died in 2005, David Mitchell attended the private memorial service. In his pocket, he carried the cue card, the joke never told, the laughter sacrificed for honor. And in Johnny's coffin, placed by his family at his request, was Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell's letter. Two voices. Separated by death and time. United by the belief that joy matters, even in darkness. Especially in darkness. The letter and the cue card. The nurse and the comedian. Both teaching America the same lesson. Laughter is how we survive. And remembering is how we honor those who made survival possible.